on zero problems, big fella. Yup. If one more label try to stop me, it's gonna be some dreadhead niggas in your lobby. Y'all ain't no problem with me. Y'all ain't no problem with me. Just another day at the pick up on the mail. Nigga tryna ride it through the street, they be like, Takeoff. Y'all ain't no problem with me. Y'all ain't no problem with me. Just another day at the pick up on the mail. Nigga tryna ride it through the street, they be like, Takeoff. Ooh, I just come and put the lenses in the air.
All right. With that said, here we are for the 2016 version of the Sigma Chi Fantasy League Awards and Playoff Predictions. I think, it's been a while since I did one of these, and I want to make it more of a tradition, but come a long way since the last one. The draft this year was so much fun, so much drugs. I'm going to cut that. I don't need that in there. But yeah, it's been awesome. This year was crazy. I mean, thinking about it, looking at the standings and how many teams could have made the playoffs with Stan sneaking in, there were, I think, 5 more that were all at that 6 and 7 spot. So it was super competitive year for the league. A lot of great matchups, a lot of really competitive shit talking, and some side bets and a lot of good stuff. So thought it was an awesome year all around. And with that said, let's dive into some of the awards. In terms of MVPs for the league this year, I kind of was thinking of breaking it into like 2 categories, because if you think about it, you can build your team through the draft really well by just nailing your top picks, or you can really do some work later in the rounds on the waiver wire, etc. And I think we really saw that play out this year. If you think about, Melvin Gordon, that guy went in the 6th round. He's a number 3 running back overall. And, he's on Huffines' team, who's like a total powerhouse this year. So that was a huge get. Matt Ryan was another one, like getting him off the waiver wire. I think Bogey picked him up in like the 13th round originally, but that was obviously a huge get too, as Huffines drafted Romo originally and totally saved his quarterback spot with that. Another really good one was Bogey grabbing Derek Carr in the 12th round. That was super good value there as well, especially when you consider how much earlier some really shitty quarterbacks went. So those were some of the best, I think, from like a pure value standpoint. But I mean, in terms of like the studs, you got, obviously David Johnson. I think that was a huge win for Stan, totally nailing that pick when everyone else was giving him shit. That guy's been a fucking workhorse all year and somehow propelled Stan into the playoffs despite, everything else that was going on. Ezekiel Elliott was kind of a no-brainer. There's some really good guys, or, guys we expected to be good that went way ahead of him. Think Todd Gurley, me picking AJ Green, some of those guys. And I mean, Zeke was totally worth the pick there. Antonio Brown, obviously. And then Mike Evans slipping into round 2 was pretty surprising too, after the way he's broken out this year. So all in all, I think, it's pretty obvious that most of those players are on some of the top teams in the league. So all those guys, probably outperformed their draft position, even if they went as high as they did. In terms of the SOBs of the year, I mean, there's several, but the few that stuck out to me the most in terms of where they were drafted, we've got Todd Gurley, huge bust this year. Didn't really, I think he's a top 20 running back, barely at the moment. Gronk was one where, I mean, you should have known by now. I learned my lesson the hard way 3 times over, but he didn't even really play that all that well. Half of the matchups he was active for. Think about Casey's team, and if he had grabbed somebody like Ezekiel Elliott, or I don't know if he was available, but there's some guys there that could have been grabbed that, if that were the case, Casey's team would have been just bulletproof, I think. So that was pretty big miss. Other ones like Doug Martin, DeAndre Hopkins, just kind of garbage guys this year. I mean, Brock Osweiler sucks, so that was kind of to be expected. That's why I steered clear of him, but yeah, so those were some of the guys that, probably fucked you over pretty bad. If you think about those players, I don't think anyone who had any of them made the playoffs, so sorry about you. Matchup of the year. I had a few candidates, somewhat self-centered, but a few of those. There were some, obviously me and Huff with the bet and just all the rivalry and everything that goes into every time we match up. That was a really big one. My team responded in a huge way, putting up 145, just firing on all cylinders that week and securing the Todd Edwin dress up day at the Tech tailgate for Huff Hines, which was fucking hilarious and something I was really glad to be on the right side of. Another one was me and Bill squaring off in week 1. That was pretty crazy. I think it ended up putting up 280 points between the two of us. It was also the Commissioner Bowl, which is, personal favorite matchup of mine since I totally own Bill. And yeah, I was also watching that at Bill's house. So that was a lot of fun to get the W there. A couple others, obviously Huff Hines versus Brett matching up a couple weekends ago. That was like, a pretty big statement game there. And Brett's team, as he seems to every time he plays one of the other big dogs, just exploded and knocked him off. And another one, which I think it was the high score of the year, was Casey against Bogey, final of 157 to 142. You had Roethlisberger, Bell, Matthews, and Doug Baldwin putting up over 100 points just on their own. So that was, I think, the high score of the year in terms of total points. So that was pretty compelling as well. Looking at upsets of the year, I mean, there are a few, but really the one that I think stands out just far and away is Paul Amara pulling the scrappy upset over Huff Hines, led by the likes of Brandon Marshall, who put up a 25 spot. But once you get into the running backs like Jalen Richard, Jaquiz Rogers, Robert Woods, I mean, he had no business winning that game. But props to Paul Amara for at least having, one thing to be happy about in this otherwise year of a write-off in terms of fantasy. You'll get in the playoffs one year, dude. I believe in you. So that was pretty much far and away the outlier there. Trade rape of the year. I mean, it's been discussed ad nauseum already, but Mike Evans, dude. Come on, Stan. Come on. So, yeah, power swung big time, balance of power in the league. It remains to be seen if it will be the trade that seals the fate of the season, but sending Mike Evans over to Brett's team, who is, hurting a little bit, lost Keenan Allen, who was supposed to be probably his really good number 2 week 1, really solidified that there, and then Brett just filled that Theo Riddick slot back in with some waiver wire dudes, Jordan Howard and stuff. So at the time, and I think still you can make the case that Theo Riddick's a solid player, not a great player by any means, but I don't think anyone really knew exactly the trajectory Evans was on this year, so that was a pretty, genius time to make the deal on Brett's part, and it's reaping dividends for him right now. I thought this was pretty hilarious. I was looking at transactions by team because I obviously am a huge tinkerer and credit myself as being the biggest of those in the league. I actually got outdone by Ben Frederick this year to the tune of 55 transactions to 53 for myself. Average hovering around 20 per team. So touche, Ben, although it looks like I'm just a little bit better at tinkering than you. But what was hilarious to me was that Pyland is by far the lowest of the entire league with a 3 transactions for the entire season. He has like 99.9% of his lineup the day it was when we left that shithole condo in New Braunfels. So pretty wild shit there. I mean, it's kind of like, different ways to get to the playoffs. Pyland, almost made it in. If Stan lost, he would have snuck in there. Brett had, very little transactions. I had a shitload. So it's kind of interesting to see, how different teams, build out every year and whether or not they stay balanced with the original roster or just go out and find a lot of new people. So with that said, actually one more category, a new category this year, side bet of the year. I'm really having a hard time deciding whose suffering I enjoyed more between Casey and Huff Hines. I think it had to be Huff Hines just because it was like more in public and it was like really hot the day that he had to wear that sweater, and I don't know, it was just pretty fucking hilarious to me. But the McRib thing, I mean, I've eaten 2 burritos from Chipotle before, so I know how that feels. I mean, I'm sure we all know Casey's colon was hurting for days after. I had the pleasure of seeing the after on Snapchat, which is always appreciated. Thanks, Case. So I'll leave that one up to you guys, which one you thought was funnier, and I challenge anyone who feels confident about their team to propose one. I mean, I'm only going to do it on the days where I feel good about things, but bring it on. With that said, playoff prediction time. Looking at the lay of the land, Stan snuck in, and he's in a favorable spot right now, at least in terms of what came out of the Thursday games. Got a big game out of Travis Kelce, and Derek Carr didn't do very much of anything in that matchup, so Bogues is a little bit behind the bullet. The other, huge factor here is Julio Jones. It's apparently going to be a game time decision for him. So, looking at the matchups, I still tend to like Bogey here. He's got Forte going against the Niners, who are just an absolute mess against running backs. DeMarco Murray's got a pretty solid matchup. If Julio plays, LA is a great matchup for receivers. So, like, most of his studs have pretty solid matchups, but obviously if Julio doesn't play, that's going to be, a huge concern. And you look at the other side of the coin with Stan, he's got Stafford going against Chicago. Last time they played, he put up only 7 points that week. David Johnson's probably going to do well. Theo Riddick's got a bad matchup. Yeah, there's just, and Ted Ginn in the flex. I just am not sure about that. So I tend to think I'm going to pick Bogey here, but by a slim margin with that said, and if Julio is not playing, then I'm going to swing that over to Stan. So Bogey there. Flipping over to my matchup with Bruton, I mean, this is like, total lack of diversity on Bruton's part. It didn't work out for him last week with, the 3 Giants. Just hilarious considering he claims to be a Cowboys fan. But, looking at like the matchups, Dallas is kind of favorable matchup for Eli Manning. It's not a good matchup for Jennings, and it's a great matchup for Odell. So, I mean, as an RB2, Jennings can kind of not put up huge numbers, and he'll be all right. But I just, I tend to think you got to diversify your bonds, nigga. So I just don't think that's going to end well, considering how Dallas has been playing this year. I think they're going to rise to the occasion, put up a good game. But looking at my shit, Rivers has been really underwhelming. He's been throwing a ton of picks lately, but he does have a favorable matchup. Panthers have been one of the best matchups for QBs this year, where I think Rawls is coming on strong at the right time. But I think Cameron Brate might be one that could, Brate and Mitchell, because like looking at my 1 and 2, just not feeling super confident about Cooks and Moncrief, given the matchups. So we'll see. I'm gonna give myself the nod here, but I think it's gonna be a close one as well. Look for Matt Prater to maybe swing the balance here. Dude throws up numbers lately. So yeah, moving into the second round, that gives us matchups of me and Brett, a timeless affair, and then Huffines over Bogues with a former roommate matchup as well. Last time me and Brett squared off in the playoffs, the year that he was saying he was going to quit because he was getting married, we matched up. I beat Brett. I thought this would be the last time I ever had to face this dude in the playoffs. Thought my demons were exercised, but find myself back here once more. So with that said, I think I just don't have the firepower to match up with Brown, with Mike Evans, with Andrew Luck, with everything there. So I mean, as much as I would love to think that I could pull that out, unless AJ Green comes back somehow and with a vengeance, I'm not putting myself through there. So put Brett into the finals, and then I'm looking at Bogey versus Brett. Bogey versus Huffines. It's hard to say. Both of them have pretty favorable matchups for their studs. Not really sure how that one's going to go, but just, over the course of the year, looking at total points, I mean, it's real close between the two of them. Actually, yeah, within 50 points. I just a little concerned about Julio's health. And I mean, running backs as the strength of Huffines team, I think could serve him well. They all have pretty good matchups that week. So going to go ahead and throw Huffines into the final here. A little bit of chalk, but so that gives us, the finals of the long, complicated relationship of Huffines versus Brett. In that matchup, it's really a toss up, and I think it's interesting because it's a total opposite construction of team with Huffines going super running back heavy, Brett having the top two receivers. Um, I'm picking the upset. I'm gonna go Huffines here. I think this is his year. Everything kind of fell into line for him. Um, you know what? No, fuck that. Fuck that. I don't think you can win a championship with Terrence Williams as your wide receiver too. And yeah, that just doesn't look good to me. Um, hmm. Yeah, Larry Fitz going against the Seahawks. All right, I'm going Brett. As much as it pains me to say it, I think he's got the team that's got the goods to go all the way this year. I know it's kind of unoriginal, but I think that's what we're going to have to live with this year. So, yeah, all things considered, good year. Really happy I made it back into the playoffs. I'm really happy that Ben didn't make the playoffs to defend his title. Just fucking with you. I'm really glad I bought Casey from getting in and made him eat two disgusting ground up pig part Play-Doh squish thingamajigs. And yeah, overall, it's been awesome. Looking forward to seeing what happens, and best of luck to everybody in the playoffs.